let's talk about this. So we think, how can you do it in the class? So how can I teach about social issues in a way that might be more post-critical, as opposed to liberal, or neoliberal, or critical, but post-critical? One of them, I would say, is pedagogy of discomfort. Pedagogy of discomfort means that these topics that we talk about, like poverty, or gender inequality, or LGBTQ issues, these are not easy topics, right? It's very difficult to talk about these topics. It makes the teacher and the students feel uncomfortable. There's discomfort. Now, our usual approach to education, if it's uncomfortable, don't do it. We don't talk about that stuff because maybe it's too political, it's too ideological, or maybe I will get in trouble, so I won't talk about that as a teacher. So then our education becomes what we call anesthetized, which means numb. It's numb education. Not living education, dead education. It's numb. But a pedagogy of discomfort leans into emotions, feelings, affect. Because children have lots of things to say about poverty and inequality, about social issues in their community, maybe about LGBTQ. So instead of avoiding it, we talk about it. We talk about things that make us uncomfortable, that cause discomfort. Because actually, it causes discomfort because it's important, and there's no clear answer. So one way to do a post-critical pedagogy is to focus on affect, on emotions, on character. So that's one. Anti-dominative pedagogy means to avoid a hierarchy between teacher and student, or between enlightened and unenlightened, and try to create an equal environment. One that includes voices of marginalized groups, vulnerable groups, groups that are usually left out. Like maybe groups from lower social economic class, or maybe male or female voices, or maybe groups from a specific region of Korea. Maybe there's a regional disparity between Seoul and other areas of the country, or Jeju. So anti-diminutive pedagogy wants to integrate voices from all of these different areas and try to create a horizontal environment. Forget that one. Don't worry about that one. It's okay. Not important. Okay, so this is the end of the first section. I'm presenting two sections. This first section is theoretical, as you can see. I'm going to try to apply it in the second section. So what this work is doing is that it's challenging the foundations of global citizenship educations that I've mentioned. The neoliberal, the liberal, the critical. Arguing that their usual frameworks are grounded in liberal peace assumptions, and that such assumptions are typically Western-centric and divorced from the lives of the students themselves. So to overcome this, we try to create context-sensitive, or context-relevant, conflict-sensitive, grounded education in the lives of those students. And this is what we would call a post-critical approach. But this criticism of GCEs, this is a philosophical exercise, right? So it's an exercise in imagination. The task of translating this into practice is much more difficult. So that's where we go to the next part two. For teachers, it might seem impossible. How can I do this? Post-critical, blah, blah, blah. I don't even know what critical is, or what liberal is, or what conservative is, or what neoliberal is. Like, this is just a bunch of jargon. I think that's a legitimate response, but it's not jargon, it's really important. So we are trying to practice it in this next section. So this is a project that we did with UNESCO OPSIU in Pakistan. So UNESCO has a project, OPSIU has a project with 20 different countries. They go to and these are developing countries because the funding comes from the Korean government and it's for overseas development assistance, so it has to be for countries that are developing. Not, it's that global north, global south point that I was making earlier. So it's in countries like Colombia, Thailand, Nepal, Morocco, and in this case, we're doing it in Pakistan. So and they're 3-year projects, so from 2024 until 2026, we are implementing global citizenship education into the elementary school curriculum of the Punjab province of Pakistan. So I'm going to tell you more about this project. Okay. And of course, global citizenship education is related to the SDGs. So we all know the Sustainable Development Goals. Sustainable Development Goal 4.7, or let's just say SDG 4, is about education, right? And then SDG 4.7 is specifically integrating global citizenship, human rights, peace, education, as an agenda of the Sustainable Development Goals. So this work is in line with the SDGs. Now, our questions that we're asking in the project are, what global citizenship education elements already exist in the curriculum? So I went to Lahore, a very large city in Pakistan, in November of last year, so about 6 months ago. And I went there to talk to the government offices, so the Ministry of Education, the curriculum board that writes the curriculum for schools, the assessment board that helps to develop the assessments. So we went to talk to different stakeholders about the current curriculum that they have and where they see global citizenship education in that curriculum, or where they see some entry points for global citizenship education to be put into it. So we tried to find possible places to put it and some gaps where it wasn't, and where might we put it next. And then the third question related to my philosophical points. How can we go beyond traditional global citizenship? Not just do the same thing that everybody does everywhere. We don't want this to be like Japan. We don't want this to be like Korea. We don't want this to be like Angola. We don't want this to be like Egypt. We want this to be specific to Pakistan. And we want to do something that pushes us further, push the field further. Not just repeat, but do something different. So how can we go beyond traditional dimensions? These are the questions that we were trying to answer in this project. Okay. Now, Pakistan, where are we at? Yeah. The context of Pakistan, it's a very, very diverse country. Ethnically, religiously, linguistically, they speak many, many different languages. They don't have a common, there's a common language, but they don't have a single language like Korea. And its education system is decentralized. So each province, there are 4 big provinces, they each manage their own education policies. So they're decentralized. So implementation of something like global citizenship education is a bit challenging because it looks different across these different regions. But Punjab, so where Lahore is the capital city of the province of Punjab. Punjab has 127 million people. That's like 2.5 times the size of Korea in just one province, not the country, just one province. So this is a testing ground, so to speak, for how to implement GCE into the curriculum of Pakistan. If it can succeed in Lahore and in Punjab, then maybe it can be implemented in other provinces, so it can go national. This is part of the aspiration of the project. In 2020, the government created a single national curriculum, so to try to promote some standardization, quality across the entire country. But this single national curriculum, it often promotes what we talked about at the beginning, nationalistic discourses. And this can overshadow both local needs, because the local need is not always the same as the national need, and it overshadows the global ideals. So balancing global citizenship with national cohesion is a tension in all global citizenship education, but especially here. So there are lots of different policies and frameworks that we examined. The 2016 minimum standards for quality education in Pakistan highlights inclusive, values-driven education aligned with SDG 4. So they're explicit, aligning it with the UN. The 2017 National Curriculum Framework that seeks to unify these diverse education systems and provide coherence across different education systems, like the public schooling, or private schooling, or religious education. And the adoption of the single national curriculum by all 4 systems. This supports the National Curriculum Framework, and it's a step forward in the development of equitable education. However, the successful integration of GCE requires improved coordination, teacher training, and monitoring mechanisms. So this is what we're working with to support. These are the key institutions involved. I think it's okay, you don't need to know them. But it's basically the curriculum and textbook board that creates the curriculum and the textbooks, the quality assessment of education that also does teacher training, and then the Ministry of Education that oversees the policy making. These 3 bodies, which today they're all integrated. Okay. These are the 3 approaches to global citizenship education that we use for our analysis. So we looked at the curriculum, we looked at the syllabi, we looked at the policy documents, and we examined for liberal global citizenship education, critical global citizenship education, and post-critical global citizenship. And you can see under it what that emphasizes. So liberal is universal human rights, democracy. Critical is systemic injustices, inequality. Post-critical is embodied, contextual, ethical. Okay. These are a further description. So this is from the report with OPSEU. So the description of what it is, some indicators, and then possible entry points. So we began at the very beginning talking about the neoliberal, the liberal, the critical, the post-critical. Again, this is just a definition of that. We also talked about cognitive, socio-emotional, and behavioral dimensions of education. Now, the way this project is different, and what I said at the beginning, how I'm doing something slightly different than typical GCE, I add a 4th dimension, which is effective relational. And I add it as a post-critical intervention, because these are not post-critical. These are all individualistic. So cognitive is about the mind of the student. Socio-emotional is about the values and attitudes of the student. Behavioral is about the behavioral practices of the student. They're all individualistic about the type of content knowledge we're trying to put in students' heads. I think this is insufficient for global citizenship. So we added effective relational to talk about relationships, how we engage with others and we interact, and focusing on our relationship with the other. It could be the other person, It could be other cultures. It could be other life, like animals. It could be nature. These are all different elements of what we call affective relational. So we added this dimension in to our assessment of that curriculum. And then this is the key words that we used for our analysis. So you can see some key words here. Again, from cognitive, liberal, we have human rights, universal values, global citizenship. From liberal, affective relational, so it's still liberal, but this relational dimension of it, we have global community, shared humanity, mutual respect, belonging. So a sense of mutuality. But in the critical, for let's say socio-emotional, we have care for others, commitment to equity, justice-oriented attitude. What is key here is this is all internal. We're telling students that they should care about others. That's not the same thing as having a good relationship with others. Those are distinctly different phenomenon. So we have, for example, in the post-critical affective relational, mutual recognition, embodied reflection, interconnectedness, nature, about those relations. So let's find it in the curriculum. Okay, so what did we do? We did desk review, we went to Pakistan twice, we talked to people, we analyzed the curriculum, and then we gave some recommendations from this. Oh, and let me make clear again, what level of education are we talking about? We're talking about elementary school. So we only looked at the elementary school curriculum. We looked at 3 subjects. The first subject was English from grade 1 to grade 5. So we looked at the entire curriculum in the syllabi. We looked at general knowledge. General knowledge is from grade 1 to 3, and that means a combination of science with social studies. And then we looked at social studies specifically from grade 4 to 5. So we looked at these 3 different areas of their textbooks. And we looked for all of this, the cognitive, the socio-emotional, the behavioral, the affective relational, and the different approaches. So let's talk about one of them. English. So in the English curriculum, we found that liberal themes of global citizenship are very strong. So students learn about empathy, peace, and cooperation through role plays. There are a lot of role plays in the textbooks, through storytelling, through group work. The early grades use storytelling and role play to nurture empathy and respect, while the later grades, so going up to grade 3, 4, 5, they introduce more complex topics like gender equality and environmental responsibility. Here we can start to see some signs of critical global citizenship education in the discussions about environmental justice and sustainable development, when those discussions critique structural injustices. So a problem in the structure of society that needs to change. When they aim for change and when they explore personal responsibility. But the most promising for us is the post-critical dimension, which includes poems about peace with ourselves and with others, stories about working together collaboratively with others, and exercises that promote emotional intelligence, perspective taking, and relational reflexivity. These post-critical elements emerge throughout the curriculum through activities that encourage emotional awareness, but they especially emerge in the upper grades through teamwork and ecological responsibility. Moreover, the textbooks in Punjab reinforce these post-critical elements with units like, these are the names of their units, let's plant trees. So in grade 2, unit 3, they have a lesson on planting trees. So being more in nature, respecting nature. In grade 3, unit 2, they have a lesson on gifts of nature. So again, it's very nature-based. And then in grade 5, unit 14, they have a lesson on Together We Live, so multiculturalism. And if you look at the textbooks very closely, on almost every page, you will find the recognition and representation of 4 different groups on almost every page. Islam, so Pakistan is an Islamic country, predominantly. So Islam are the key values that are integrated into the text, and they will have the religious groups represented on the textbooks. But there are other minority groups that they also intentionally include, such as Christians, such as the Sikh population, and Hindus. I believe there are many more groups than these, but they include these 4. And the curriculum is also multilingual in many respects. Much of it is taught in Urdu, but also much of it is taught in English. So in our review, we reviewed all the English materials, but we had a research assistant review Urdu materials. And they're moving to do translations into English for all of their curriculum. So this multicultural aspect of GCE is already well established there. So in grades 1 to 2, we have foundational knowledge for understanding people from different backgrounds, helping others, and nurturing traits like respect and empathy. These are taught. Activities include role plays and group discussions to apply ethical values. In grade 3, environmental awareness and ecological responsibility are emphasized in units like gifts of nature, laying the foundation for responsible citizenship and developing relational skills through collaborative problem solving as well as human nature involvement. And in grades 4 to 5, more complex themes start to emerge, including participatory citizenship, so being an active citizen, gender equality, and peaceful coexistence. Here we have units like the fox and the stork to foster multi-perspective taking and reflexivity. So we see a progression from liberal to more critical and relational forms of learning across the years, from grade 1 to grade 5. Now, a key lesson to take away from this analysis, and it's also reinforced in the other subjects, is the important role of the teacher and how he or she interprets and teaches these lessons in the classroom. So this is a really important missing variable here. Whether the teacher will teach the liberal, the critical, the post-critical approach, or a mix of each of these, and how he or she emphasizes the cognitive, social-emotional, behavioral, and or effective relational dimensions of GCE. This makes all the difference, as we know. Teachers are so critical in this process. Thus, the teacher's awareness of these various approaches and their capacity to carry them out is integral to how global citizenship education is taught. I'm going to skip through most of it. I want to show you something at the end here. So that's the English. We go through general knowledge, so we also do the same thing with general knowledge. We find similar things. In social studies, this is, as is typical with global citizenship education, this is probably the most aligned with GCE already. So ways to implement it. So how can we do it? What is our recommendation for the educators in Pakistan? So we recommend linking local ethical traditions with GCE. So look toward Islam, look toward Sufi, look toward other indigenous forms of ethics that you can link together with global ethics coming from Kant or the West. Reframe the curricula from local to global issues. embed GCE in learning materials, and I'm going to show this to you in a second, and strengthen effective relational learning. So through things like role plays, group discussions, reflective exercises, focusing on emotions and relationality. So this is an example of what they do and what we're recommending them to expand. This is the book cover to their textbooks. It's usually found at the beginning or the end of the textbook. And this is a message with a value on it, right? I think this one of these I think is coming from the English textbook, maybe grade 5. And the other one I think is coming from science textbook. So this one you can see is trying to encourage students to share your lunch with others, care for them. So it's a subtle, maybe, way to implement these values. This one is suggesting environmental conservation by turning off the lights. These are just very, very simple maxims or values that they share with the students in the beginning and the ends of those textbooks. And we think that's a very creative way to approach the values aspect of GCE, but also that subtly involves post-critical relations. So we encourage them to expand this. Okay. There are lots of limitations to this research, but it's okay. We don't need to talk about the limitations. I'm gonna stop here because I want to answer your questions. But I'm gonna share with you this last slide. So if you're interested around the research that it's based on, as well as a copy of the actual UNESCO report that we wrote, you can get it at this QR code. So it's open access, you can have a copy of it. I'm one of the authors with some of my PhD students who supported me in terms of writing the report for UNESCO last fall. And then we went and we did the training with the educators in April. And then we're going to go back next year in 2026 to follow up on outcomes from the project. What we know that they are doing, so there's a team of educators in the subjects of English, social studies, Islamiyat, which means Islamic ethics, and maybe general knowledge in those 4 subjects. The curriculum specialists are working to implement the model that we just discussed with you today. So we're going to go back early next year to follow up and see what the outcome is. But they are putting it into their entire curriculum. And this curriculum, what is the number on this? If I remember correctly, this curriculum is used by 12 million students and 400,000 teachers. So it's a massive project in terms of its potential implications. So I hope to be able to share with you good outcomes in a year. Okay, well, we'll stop here and let's answer your questions about GCE.
Informative presentation, especially because our new revised curriculum, Korean national curriculum, also emphasize global citizenship education, but even in-service teachers and pre-service teachers have no idea how can we actually do it. So it was very informative. Thank you again. Any questions regarding global citizenship education or regarding the presentation that Professor Kester gave? Any questions? Is there?
I have a lot of my students that are looking at the 2022 revised curriculum for peace education or global citizenship. Also thinking about how deeply GCE is involved.
Yeah. Any questions?
Yeah.
Is that with me?
Thank you for your lecture today, and question might be not about GCE or
Yeah.
education.
You can ask anything you want, it's fine.
Just as Professor Choi said, I am currently working as a teacher while pursuing my master's degree, and while teaching about unification in my social studies classes, I often feel very challenging because it is an issue with a lot of conflicting interests, and Korean teachers need to keep their political neutrality, but while we have to guide our students to the value of the unification at the same time, so it is very difficult. And I always struggle how best I could approach to that problem. So can I ask your opinion about how the unification education can be effectively applied in elementary level?
You mean how to effectively apply it? I think I would probably approach it because, so peace education and unification education are often overlapped with each other. So they consider them to be the same thing. But there are distinct differences between these approaches. Right? So I think I would approach it in the way of being bottom-up. So a bottom-up education, for whether you call it unification education or you call it peace education, asking questions around what the objective is. What are we trying to achieve? So what is the goal of unification education? What is the goal of peace education? Whom is it serving? So who is it that seeks to benefit from this particular version of our curriculum or our education? Including, as we said at the beginning, within South Korea itself, around the different demographic groups that we're working with. So we know from surveys on unification education that there's a huge distinction between seniors and juniors. So young students have very little interest in unification education, whereas the older population has much more interest in unification, partly because of relation, because they're older and they have a sense of understanding the context from which it came, and young people are more distanced from that historical moment in time. So part of it is that, but there's different values between the generations. So, in other words, what I'm saying is we should approach it as an inquiry-based learning of asking questions. What is our goal with unification education? Who is it going to serve if we achieve unification education? And what do different groups in Korea have to benefit from it? And how would it be different if I call it peace education or global citizenship education instead of unification education?
I think the word unification education, the word is a bit like maybe if I was the Ministry of Education, like the Chief of Ministry of Education, I would reframe it because it looks like the goal is unification, right? It might not work, right? That's not really end goal. The goal is we want to get along with each other, right? We want to understand each other, right? So maybe the word itself maybe can be transformed into peace education.
Yeah, and there is, I think you find a general split. So if you look at the literature and you talk to folks who are studying this, there's a general split between the left and right. So unification tends to be more from the right, and peace tends to be more from the left. And so scholars who are working on it, because the Ministry of Education provides much funding to our universities, maybe even KNU as a research group to study peace and unification studies. So already in the government orientation, they've already articulated both peace and unification, which is, I think, a friendly way to say left and right thinking on the notion of unification. And for some, they want, as you said, they want a unified peninsula, reunification, and the question is, what type of unification does that mean? What if it were to happen, what does tomorrow look like? And this is a very different framing than what most of those who are talking about peace or peace unification, they're talking about different things. So just like with the global citizenship education, there's different paradigms of how people discuss it. With your school education, you're teaching elementary school? Yeah. Of course, in elementary school, we don't talk about these things. There's no way that you're talking to a young child about liberal global citizenship education, post-critical global citizenship, or critical unification education. We don't use that language because it's far too not relatable. They can't relate to it. But the educators are doing it. So the educators base their practice off of one of these different approaches. And often without knowing that they're doing it. Maybe because they learned it from their advisor, or just that's what they read online. But there are values behind it that we need to unpack. So I think what is important in all of this is that when we implement curriculum, it's not just top down. It has to be a bottom up. As much as possible, our teaching has to be democratic, participatory, elicitive, not prescriptive. And the more that we can do that, especially with young people, because young children are smart and they're much more creative than we are. And they're also very honest. So in some ways, they have no problem with discomfort. They're very happy with discomfort. So we should lean into this, not try to shut it down. So when I talk to the educators in Pakistan, for them, that's post-critical. This is post-critical. These kids are smart, they're caring, they're loving, they're brave. Let's build that up. So they were trying to say, bring it from the kids, not just forcing curriculum on them. And it would go the same with unification.
I think you have a class starting from 6, right? Yeah. So for undergraduate students, I think they might need to go and have dinner. You feel free to have some 披当蟹. I bought some breads and you can have so. Or if you have more passion, you feel free to stay around and mingle with us for next 20 minutes.
You're the undergraduate?
Yeah, undergraduates. Obviously, right? yeah. Young students.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
What is maybe the most interesting point or most difficult point for you? Anything is okay. Anything is okay. What are you're studying elementary education, right?
Yeah.
Is it?
Elementary.
Specific subject?
Yeah, EFL.
EFL. You're studying EFL.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Good. Don't worry. It's okay.
Receiving, do you have anything to say? Interesting aspect?
GC 글로벌 글로벌 citizency education is 약간 전반적인 부분들
전반적인.
네, 그냥 전체적으로 그 example of Pakistan and curriculum and interest.
It's
네.
interesting. Like the Pakistan as an example because like we don't usually learn about like Pakistani curriculum, right? Yeah, that's interesting. Any difficult parts?
Simon, I know nothing about Pakistan curriculum either before I do this, but I think it's really fascinating. For me, the fascinating part is what can we learn from Pakistan? Usually we're thinking what we can teach them, but what do we learn from them? And I think looking at the curriculum, we learn a lot about multicultural education as global citizenship education. It's very powerful.
We will let them go. All right.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you for attending. Yeah. Feel free to take some stuff. Yeah, or you can stay here and we're going to have some wine and discuss a little bit further. Yeah.
You don't have to ask me about this. This is not interesting. Don't worry. You can ask me anything.
Ask about SNU. Yeah. Alright. Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah.
여기에 그 뭐 먹을 거 이런 거 준비